Rare peek inside the Eerie mansion that's been frozen in time for 60 years.
Before we begin, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell for more amazing videos.
For over 6 decades, 1407 East Cabrillo Boulevard in Santa Barbara, California, was a place only whispered about in passing. A sprawling seaside estate set high upon cliffside. Its magnificence was matched only by its mystery. No one ever entered the grounds, and over those years, no one ever came out. Many have speculated about the true nature of the property. Was it a home? An institution? Something far more sinister? But for the first time, the wrought iron gates of the estate have finally been thrown open, exposing a tale of wealth, tragedy, and in some small ways, hope. What lies beyond? The front gate, however, tells a different story. One of seclusion. But as you continue along the asphalt-paved drive and into the heart of the compound, you'll soon come upon an incredible sight. Bellosguardo. Named for the Italian-style villa that originally stood on the grounds, the property was purchased by Montana Senator and copper magnate William Clark in 1923 for a cool $300,000, equal to around $4 million today. Sadly, he wouldn't get to enjoy Bellosguardo for long. Senator Clark died in 1925, the same year the Great Santa Barbara earthquake ravaged the area and damaged the home. Clark's widow, Anna, took it upon herself to rebuild, and in 1933 she completed the 22,000-square-foot French-style mansion that sits on the grounds today. Bellosguardo became a summer home for the Clarks, and during the Great Depression, it kept hundreds of housekeepers, gardeners, cooks, craftsmen, and other service workers employed. The estate was a world in and of itself. Unfortunately, this paradise wouldn't last. In 1951, the Clarks left Bellosguardo to visit some of the other estates their fabulous wealth had afforded them. Workers continued to maintain the property per Anna's orders, though as weeks turned to months and months into years, it was clear the family had no intention of returning to the compound. Anna died in 1963, leaving Bellosguardo to her only living child, Huguette. Despite never venturing back to the Santa Barbara estate before her own death in 2011, Huguette gave 2 orders to the remaining Bellosguardo staff: keep everything in first-class condition and make no changes. They followed these instructions to the letter. For 60 years, everything in the house has remained exactly as it was back in 1951. The oak floors remain polished and clutter-free, and you'd be hard-pressed to find even one of the home's hundreds of priceless light fixtures without fresh working bulbs. The various paintings that adorn Bellosguardo are also pristine, with years of intense care rendering them free of fading and almost freshly painted in appearance. This portrait depicts Anna Clark, the original force behind the estate preservation. Bellosguardo is still fully furnished, though most of the armchairs and couches are covered to preserve the nearly 100-year-old wood and fabric beneath. Housekeepers regularly dust every inch of the home, including each page of the hundreds of books that line the walls of Bellosguardo's many studies. A number of the rooms boast exquisitely intricate wood paneling, an inclusion that made the 3,000-mile journey from New York to Santa Barbara, along with the Clarks. These accents were actually once part of the family's Manhattan mansion, and were shipped cross-country after they demolished their former home in 1925. And the Clarks weren't above a little leisure time. Their music room features twin Steinway pianos and a pair of French pedal harps. And throughout the home you can find a number of gaming tables primed for rounds of bridge or chess. To reach the various bedrooms that make up a fraction of Bellosguardo's 27 main rooms, a beautiful wooden staircase ascends from the heart of the mansion's ground level. There are 9 bedrooms in total, 6 for the Clarks, and 3 smaller ones for staff. Bellosguardo also boasts a number of opulent bathrooms, each featuring fine stone and golden accents. This one even includes a bathtub carved from a single slab of marble. Exiting into the backyard, a small decorative pool extends out into a maze of pruned trees and ornamental hedges. Beyond that, the 23 acres of property butts up against the California coastline, stretching for more than 1,000 feet along sun-kissed sandy shores. The grounds also feature Bellosguardo's original carriage house, which still holds the many luxury vehicles that once serviced the Clarks. In addition to being in mint condition, all of the cars still bear their original 1949 license plates. Lastly, at the rear of the property sits Andre's cottage, named for Huguette's older sister who died of meningitis in 1919. The cottage serves as a memorial to Andre, as do the handful of paintings of her hung throughout the main house. All told, the estate is valued at a whopping $85 million, though even in the months leading up to her death, Huguette never once considered selling it. That's because in her will, the 104-year-old heiress made a special stipulation concerning the fate of Bellosguardo. Under the Bellosguardo Foundation, the estate is now in the process of being transformed into a cultural center for the arts. And according to their website, the foundation already has some big plans for the future of the former Clark compound. Be it coming up to enjoy a family picnic by the Rose Garden, delve into the estate's history, view art from institutions around the world, or take in a jazz recital on the lawn, Bellosguardo will become a new home for art, music, history, and culture on the California coast. Future generations can tour the rooms of Bellosguardo and glimpse an authentic side of the past, something only found in abandoned buildings. And while the Clark family estate benefited from the tedious care of an entire staff, most abandoned properties aren't as pristine. Take one remote farmhouse discovered in Northern Ireland that, apart from decades of dust, remained frozen in time for over 100 years. The eerily untouched property was observed a century later when a photographer named Rebecca shared her findings with the Northern Irish website, The Newsletter. Even though it was messy, she said, we could see on shelves and in cupboards that the history in this country cottage was something to get very excited about. And as she made her way through the cottage, she came across fascinating historical treasures in every room. Once I took a walk through each room and had a proper look. I was blown away by the historical items that were left here, Rebecca told the Belfast Telegraph in August 2019. This literally was the diamond in the rough. The owner of the house, a neighbor who inherited it after the last man to live there died, asked Rebecca to document a building that was seemingly frozen in time. That final resident was a dairy farmer referred to only as Desi. Even though the photographs Rebecca took have an undeniably eerie quality, she felt quite comfortable during her visits to the old abandoned home. Some buildings have very different atmospheres, she explained. But I felt welcome in Desi's house, which was surprisingly quite warm, even though there hadn't been any heating in it for a long time. The house is located in rural Northern Ireland, not far from the County Tyrone town of Cookstown. Look at a map and you'll see that it's more or less in the middle of Northern Ireland. This constituent nation of the UK is in the northern part of the island of Ireland and was created in 1920. To the south lies the much larger territory of the Republic of Ireland, independent from Britain since 1921. Rebecca has been running her Abandoned Nye website since 2017. On it, she publishes the stories and images of abandoned buildings all over Northern Ireland and the Republic. She's also worked in Belgium, where she documented a derelict hospital. Rebecca gives lectures as well, and in 2018 mounted an exhibition about Desi's house. Rebecca has photographed many fascinating locations around Ireland. These have included the neglected Kylaughter Castle in County Antrim, Northern Ireland, which dates back to the 1620s. It's been much altered and added to during the ensuing centuries. In the early 1900s, a wealthy American woman, Elizabeth Bessie Bringhurst Smith, lived in some style at the castle. When Rebecca visited in 2018, though, roofs, windows, and doors were all gone, and the interior was filled with rubbish. In a 2017 entry on the Abandoned Nye site, Rebecca wrote, "People always ask, have you ever had any paranormal experiences while urban exploring? The answer is yes. I've had a few things that I cannot explain. Every building that I document has a different vibe, some good and some not so good." So, what paranormal phenomenon has Rebecca been a witness to? She writes of a visit to a glorious mansion dating from the late 19th century. This was in fact the very property that first sparked her interest in photographing abandoned buildings. On her website, she describes visiting the site with a friend. "We had walked the entire house from top to bottom and had been there maybe 30 or 40 minutes. To the best of my knowledge, there was no one else in the house. The two explorers were just at the doorway to the house's grand ballroom when there was a massive crash behind us. I shouted out hello, as I was thinking there had to be someone here. There was no answer, but then, through the silence, I could hear footsteps coming over the rubble towards us, along with the swishing of someone's arm on their clothing. Rebecca related the reaction of her and her friend. At this point, it's fight or flight. My only option was flight. We ran down the hallway and out the front door. And the photographer has experienced other strange happenings. One such incident came at an abandoned tuberculosis hospital in Northern Ireland. When she toured this spooky building, she heard voices, but there was nobody there. Then there was the property that Rebecca bills as Northern Ireland's most notorious ghost house. Rebecca describes hearing tales about the Canine ghost house years before. When I was young, I remember my grandmother talking about a local haunting. One where the family was tormented by a poltergeist throwing plates, knocking walls, and even shaking the children out of their beds. A widow called Bridget Murphy was living in the house with her kids when the haunting occurred in 1913. She called in a priest to try to bring an end to the disturbing events. But although he exorcised the property not once but twice, it was to no avail. Terrified by the events in their home, the Murphys upped sticks and relocated to the U.S. Nonetheless, when Rebecca visited in 2017, all was peaceful. We'll get back to Rebecca's photos and the story of Dessie shortly. But first, let's find out something of the history of County Tyrone, where the old farmhouse is located. The anglicized name of the county comes from the Gaelic Tyrone. That translates as territory of Owen. This Owen was the son of Neil, a figure who's come down through history and legend in tales from some 15 centuries ago. Neil was apparently a fearsome warrior and chieftain who fought everyone from the Romans to the English, not to mention the Scots and the French. And it seems that Neil wasn't just very active on the battlefield. There was also the bedchamber. Professor Don Bradley of Dublin's Trinity College led a research team studying the genetic heritage of Neil, and its findings were published in June 2020. The study concluded that a startling 1 in 12 of all Irish males may share DNA with the ancient warlord. Moreover, in the northwest of Ireland, this proportion rises to an astonishing 20%. Neil gave the commonplace Irish surname O'Neill to posterity. Bradley described the research conclusions during a June 2020 interview with the Irish Central website. In many countries, powerful men historically have more children, and it's not that hard to believe that it happened in Ireland too, he explained. We estimate there are maybe 2 to 3 million descendants in the modern age, with a concentration in Ireland, obviously. In addition, according to Bradley, some 1 in 50 New Yorkers with surnames of Irish origin, such as O'Reilly, O'Connor, or O'Neill, are distant descendants of the ancient Neil. Neil is also famous in Irish history for taking 9 hostages. They were the unfortunates seized by the warlord during his many conflicts with the peoples of other nations and Irish kingdoms. One of the captives is said to have been St. Patrick, Ireland's modern-day patron saint. So, County Tyrone can trace its history back to the days when Ireland was riven by conflicts between rival warlords. In more recent times, the Earl of Tyrone, Hugh O'Neill, was forced to flee his lands by English invaders in 1607. His territories were forfeited, and Tyrone became a colony of the English state. The die was cast for centuries of bitter conflict, not only in County Tyrone, but across the whole island of Ireland. Cookstown, the nearest place of any size to Dessie's farmhouse, was the scene of a rebellion by Irish natives against the planters in 1641. The planters were those who came from England and appropriated the seized lands of County Tyrone. The settlers, backed by English forces, extracted a brutal revenge, burning the settlement to ashes. For nearly 100 years after that devastation, the town languished. Eventually, prosperity returned in the late 18th century, and an almost completely new settlement was built. Cookstown now took on the role of a market town, serving the rural population with trade in cloth and farming necessities. In the 19th century, the Industrial Revolution arrived in Cookstown in the shape of linen mills and the advent of the railroad. In fact, if you visit Cookstown today, you'll see very many of the same buildings and streets that a 19th century farmer would have walked past. History came calling again at Cookstown during the Irish War of Independence. In 1920, the Irish Republican Army attacked a police barracks in the town. During the fighting, IRA volunteer Patrick Lauren died, the first Republican casualty in that period of Irish conflict. It's now time that we return to the story of Desi's house. Desi was the home's last occupant, living there on his own for a time after the two brothers he'd shared it with had died. By 2015, Desi was in his 80s and could no longer support himself alone at the farmhouse, so he relocated to a care home, where he died in 2017, the very year that Rebecca first came across the house. The new owner of the property asked Desi to document the incredible contents of the old site. The plan was to knock down the house and build a new one, but all concerned wanted me to record Desi's place before it was demolished, Rebecca told the Belfast Telegraph in August 2019. The house was a nondescript story and a half cottage, so I wasn't really expecting much when I went there one early winter Sunday morning with the snow on the ground. The photographer recalled her first visit. Once I got inside, I could see the house was full of clutter and a lot of rubbish, Rebecca said. Each room was stacked high, floor to ceiling, with Reader's Digest boxes unopened. There were up to 200 magazines, but they weren't in great condition because of the damp. And there was a poignant tale behind those stacks of Reader's Digest publications. The neighbor explained that Desi subscribed to the magazine through loneliness, as he didn't have many visitors, and he was the last surviving member of the family, Rebecca recalled. He apparently didn't cancel the magazine because he felt that someone was sending him letters, which is quite sad. Before she could take the photographs she wanted, though, Rebecca first had to get the house into some sort of order. She spent a number of days clearing out some of the junk until, she said, eventually I had the place back to the way it would have been, and I was excited to photograph and document the lives of Desi and the rest of the people who had lived there previously. On that first visit, we found WWI Binoculars, a newspaper dating from 1912 with the headline reading about the Titanic sinking, Rebecca told the newsletter website. I also found Victorian-era clothing in the wardrobe, war journals and bags of old coins dating from the 1800s, along with ration books and newspapers from the latter end of 1890. Another old newspaper, a copy of the Mid-Ulster Mail dated January 27, 1917, made fascinating reading. Its front page included an advert for a shipping company, the Allen Line, and offered passages to Canada from Glasgow and Liverpool, and from Glasgow to Boston. Elsewhere, a store called Tubman's offered tobacco, cigarettes, cigars, and pipes. Perhaps it was at Tubman's that Desi, or one of the other farmhouse residents, bought the well-used pipes that Rebecca found in the house. The pipes are accompanied by a collection of old buttons, a wristwatch, and various publications. One of those is the intriguingly titled Second Best Bride, presumably a romance. It came from the pen of a Canadian author, Louis Arthur Cunningham, and is illustrated with a picture of an anxious-looking young woman. Let's hope she did better than second best. Several of the most striking images are of the kitchen, which would likely have been the center of the home. There's an old-fashioned cast-iron stove where Desi is said to have baked traditional Irish bread. 3 steel kettles sit atop the range, perhaps ready to make the strong tea that many of the Irish are so partial to. Another of Rebecca's images shows an empty jar labeled Irish honey, set in front of a metal teapot. A second kitchen photograph displays a battered transistor radio and an antique set of scales. Rebecca wrote that the radio was in frequent use to keep up with the news. Although a television was in the property, apparently Desi had no time for that piece of modernity. An old tin that once contained OXO beef stock cubes is one of many similar containers Rebecca found in the house. OXO gravy, as good as it tastes, claims the legend on the box. Inside it is another smaller OXO container as well as 2 pocket watches. Many of the numerous such tins in Desi's house also had small collections of knickknacks within them. There's also a photo of a diploma for an inspector of weights and measures dated 1894. Another image, this time one of a photographic portrait of a man in police uniform, has a fascinating story to tell. This police officer was the same person who earned the diploma. Although the name on the document is obscured here, we know that it's Edwin Robert McQueen. It was some time after she'd taken the photos at Desi's house that Rebecca finally worked out what part McQueen played in this tale. He was in fact married to Desi's mother, although he wasn't Desi's dad. The couple wed following the death of her first husband, Desi's father. It was a short union, however, since McQueen himself passed away just a couple of years after they tied the knot. We don't know for sure, but this photo may well show the marital double bed. A second room with a single bed includes a wardrobe with a broken glass panel. A pair of ancient battered shoes lies beside the bed along with what appears to be a chamber pot. A stylish tartan-lined raincoat hangs from the distressed wardrobe, but the bedclothes have been reduced to rags over the years. The living room of Desi's home features in another fascinating photo. We see the open fireplace with an old-fashioned rush broom propped against it. Perished leather furnishings are set off by an old oil lamp, and a mirrored wardrobe fills one corner. The next image, also taken in the living room, zooms in on the mantelpiece above the fireplace. A fine clock stuck forever at 12:15 is the centerpiece. Around it are what look like souvenir plates, plus some seashells and a couple of ceramic ornaments. These are perhaps keepsakes from vacations taken long ago. This photograph shows a fine collection of old medicines and remedies, plus an assortment of other bric-a-brac laid out on a small wooden desk. A vial of Elliman's universal embrocation rubs shoulders with other bottles, one containing liquid paraffin, another wild honey balsam. There's also a sack marked Spratt's Patent London Limited. This was a British dog food developed by an American, James Spratt, which he patented in the early 1860s. Our final image is a moving one indeed. It shows an unidentified man, a couple of watches, another pipe, and some handwritten letters. Throughout the house, Rebecca found troves of love letters secreted in various cabinets. She told the Belfast Telegraph. The letters were between Desi's brother and his girlfriend. They were supposed to get married, but they never did. I was mesmerized.